The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
If I get the feeling you've been cheated.
It is Wednesday, November 2nd, 2022. My name is Sam Seder. This is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Tim Drea, president of the Illinois AFL-CIO, on the Workers' Rights Amendment to the Illinois Constitution. Also on the program today, reporter Lee Harris from the American Prospect on the unionization efforts and those new green industry jobs we got in the IRA and the American Cares Act. Also on the program today, Fed set to assault workers and the economy again today with more interest rate hikes. CVS and Wallgreens settle opioid lawsuits for about $10 billion. With the midterms less than a week away, Republicans seem to hold a narrow lead in the House. Meanwhile, New Hampshire, Nevada polling showing Republican gains. Judge curbs the actions of the so-called election monitoring groups in Arizona, yahoos with rifles. National Labor Relations Board says Starbucks broke the law in shutting down its Ithaca store to fight the union efforts there. Bibi Netanyahu, God, I can't believe I'm saying this, in lead in the Israeli elections with about 80% in. Denmark's center-left prevails. Best numbers in about 2 decades for them. The Ukraine grain export deal is back on as Russia rejoins it, though it doesn't seem to have been, seems a little porous the past couple of days.
I made it a practical consideration.
And I like this. The Treasury Department eyeing possible investigation into Lonnie Musk's Twitter deal over his foreign government investors. Saudi's got a big piece in this.
There's some China stuff, too, and it's very funny, like Dave Rubin saying, LeBron won't criticize China. You know who also won't criticize China?
Mm-hmm. Lindsey Graham must testify, according to the Supreme Court, in that case in Georgia. However, there's a little caveat. Seems to have an out to answer any of those questions. All this and more on today's Majority Report. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us. Emma's out today, dealing with some stuff. Nothing bad, but life stuff. She'll be back tomorrow, of course. We are, as you probably know, 6 actual days out from the Tuesday election. Just a reminder, we're going to be live Tuesday night. I'm not sure when. We're not sure what the lineup is going to be. I suspect that we will be drunk by the end of the evening.
Yeah, I can predict the mood.
Yes, the mood's not going to be great, and I'm just trying to work out a schedule in terms of what I'm going to be drinking at what time and just how messy it's going to be. Longtime viewers of this program have seen me a little bit loosey-goosey on the ends of nights like this. And as the bleaker things get, the more loosey-goosey I get. as it were. So you may want to tune in for that, not just for the sake of my. In the meantime, you know what would be a good idea? Go out and go around your neighborhoods. I know friends who are going down to Pennsylvania this weekend, doing some door-to-door work down there. Pennsylvania, obviously incredibly important. Wisconsin, Ohio, North Carolina, New Hampshire, Nevada in particular. If you have the opportunity to go out, knock on some doors, explain to people why it's very important for them to vote. Well, there are places in New York State, frankly, where it's also really important. Here is Joe Biden, who I gotta say, like, he's been out there. I know everybody's talking about how much Obama's been out there, but I feel like Biden has been out there in a more effective way than Obama was when he was in that same position back in 2010. And this, I think, it was perhaps, and I have no sense of how much it's coming up in the context of each House district. But one of the things that made it very effective for Democrats in 2018 is that they had a national message, which is Donald Trump sucks. You can't vote against him, but you can vote against the guy. More often than not, it's a guy who is his surrogate. Now, of course, there's a different dynamic going on. You have the president of the opposite party. I think most of you are familiar that it's almost a lock every year that the party in power is going to lose seats in the House. However, the Republicans, about 3 or 4 or 5 weeks ago, maybe even more than that, started to give the Democrats what could be a national message. The polling seems to show that the abortion question sort of baked in already, that there's not a lot of growth in that area. Part of it also, it seems to have like left the front pages in September and October in particular. But the fact is, the Republicans have a plan to cut Social Security and Medicare, and to do so even with Joe Biden in office, and that is to leverage the national debt ceiling. Here's Joe Biden on that in Florida.
I have a brochure here he has. He's in charge.
Pause it for 1 second. This is Tim Scott's brochure. Rick Scott's, excuse me. Rick Scott, senator from Florida. He is also the chair of the National Republican Senate Re-election Committee. And here's Biden.
I have a brochure here he has. He's in charge of electing Republicans to the Senate. He's the head of the campaign. And he laid out a clear plan. He said every 5 years, Social Security and Medicare would have to be reauthorized. And this is from the report. I made it larger, listed all they want to do. Quote, all federal legislation sunsets, means goes out of existence in 5 years. If the law is worth keeping, Congress will pass it again. So every 5 years, the Congress would have to vote to reauthorize Social Security. Reauthorize it, or else it goes away. Would have to vote to reauthorize Medicare. Reauthorize veterans' benefits. And I go down the list, but guess what? The very idea that a senator from Florida wants to cut Social Security and Medicare, and by the way, they don't have to go away, they can cut it. They can change it, basically. A senator from Florida going after Medicare and Social Security? I tell you what, I don't know where, as they say in Southern, don't know where y'all been. Hot damn, boy. I tell you, look, it's so outrageous you might not even believe it. And again, word for word, all federal legislation sunsets, means goes away in 5 years. If the law is worth keeping, Congress can pass it again. In other words, it goes out of existence if Congress doesn't vote to keep it. Isn't that wonderful?
There's a couple of things that are interesting to hear about this, and understand that means they can destroy Social Security and Medicare without even taking a vote. They do nothing. They control the House. They control the Senate. They only have to do nothing if it goes away automatically. And they could reauthorize it, but with 67 years is when you get to retire. 69 years is when you get to retire. There's no cost of living increases. And the reason why Joe Biden says you may not believe this, that there's a specific reason why he does that, because they have done focus test groups over the years. They've had multiple findings like this, where they show people Republican Party positions. They show them the platform, or they raise like the fact that Republicans have since 1936, since the day it was implemented, been attempting to destroy Social Security. They tell people in the focus groups this, and the focus group people do not believe that's their position. They show them ads and they go, I don't, no, that's a lie. And they'll, and the focus testers are like, what do you mean it's a lie? And they go like, I just don't think that's their position.
It's not real.
It's not real. They just can't believe that there are politicians who are out to do this. And let's be clear. The idea that the Republican Party is willing to pursue things that the majority of Americans are against, we have seen this. We see it with abortion. We see it with a whole host of other policies. They have worked it out where minoritarian rule is possible. It exists in the Senate. It exists through gerrymandering across the states. It exists in the context of the Electoral College. The last two Republican presidents who have been elected to this country for the first time did so without the majority of votes. So they can get away with this. They work for a very specific group of people that are not interested in things like Social Security and Medicare, VA benefits. I mean, go on and on. That's just the reality of it. You say what you want about the Democrats, and we certainly do. But you have one party that is out, and you want to talk about enabling the Democrats to be crappy. When you talk about cutting Social Security and Medicare, it doesn't make it that hard. You've really lowered the bar. So get out and do some work if you can over the next couple of days. And, you know, for some people, abortion may be the issue. For people my age, the idea of Social Security and Medicare going away in 5 years, it's a bummer. I'm looking forward to that Medicare.
Yeah, let increasingly minoritarian Congress deal with these programs.
I can't even begin to tell you. I just got to like the health insurance stuff is just the greatest pain in the ass. I feel like I have a second job. Meanwhile, speaking of our first job, we have a couple of sponsors today. One of them is Z-Biotics. So Z-Biotics is a probiotic drink. It breaks down the byproduct of alcohol, which I did not know this. Turns out to be, like, I always assume that the reason why you get a hangover is because alcohol dehydrates you. Apparently what it is that there is a byproduct of alcohol, which is the most responsible thing for rough mornings after drinking. And all you got to do is this. You drink a bottle of Z-Biotics before your first drink of alcohol. One bottle's all you need. Doesn't matter if you're going to have one drink or multiple drinks. And you drink responsibly. Obviously, you pace yourself to the extent that you can. You get a good night's sleep. Next day, you feel like normal, refreshed, and you make the most of it. And like I say, here's how it works. You got a toxic byproduct of alcohol, builds up in your unprepared gut. And that's what causes you to get you the headache, the nausea, etc. the next day. Z-Biotics produces an enzyme. It's like the one that your liver uses to break down this byproduct. And Z-Biotics is the first genetically engineered probiotic. It's created by altering the DNA of a natural probiotic bacteria that we eat all the time. Z-Biotics is not vitamins. It is not plant extracts. There's no off-the-shelf ingredients. Z-Biotics has been rigorously tested and is FDA compliant for safety. So if you're the type of person who enjoys a drink with friends, you want to have a drink to unwind at night, maybe you're sensitive the next morning, and you got a full day planned, you want to work out, you want to go, I don't know, host a podcast, Z-Biotics is perfect for you. I will tell you this. When I was in Vegas, I brought 3 bottles of Z-Biotics there. And, sometimes you're out there and you don't know. Like there's a couple people I'm friendly with. You don't know how it's going to go. And I will tell you this, both Thursday and Friday show, basically of that week, brought to you by Z-Biotics. I would have been a disaster. But it really works. Very effective. And like I say, one tiny bottle like this, you drink it before you go out and you're covered. You can get 15% off your first order of Z-Biotics pre-alcohol probiotic. Go to zbiotics.com/majority. Use the code majority. That's the letter Z, then biotics, biotics.com/majority. Coupon code majority at checkout saves you 15%. The link will be in the description. And also, if you're like me, you forget to get presents sometimes for people. Well, one of our sponsors today is Established Titles. Established Titles is a project based on the historic Scottish custom where landowners are referred to as lairds, lords, or ladies in English. Established Titles allows you to ceremonially buy as little as 1 square foot of dedicated land in Edelston, Scotland, so you can call yourself a lord or a lady. I mean, it's a fun gift. I don't know what you're going to do by calling yourself a lord or lady, but it is fun. You get an official certificate with a crest, which features your unique plot number. This allows you to see exactly where your plot is located. Mine, I actually have 2. I'm both a lady and a lord simultaneously because you can do that. I know that freaks a lot of people out, but here's mine. My plot is 287912. We talk about it quite a bit at the around the table at dinner. We speak about how that's our plot, and but it's cute. It's fun. Here's the best part: Established Titles. They plant 1 tree with every order. So Established Titles does great work all over the world with environmental organizations like One Tree Planted and Trees for Future. So Established Titles, fun novelty gift, but you're also planting a tree, adding to the trees in Scotland and supporting global afforestation products. Makes a great last minute gift. They even have couple packs that come with adjoining plots of land. So I don't know, somebody for their anniversary or something like that. And you can officially change your name to Lord or Lady. Is that true? You get it on your credit card. Is that true? That's
right in my passport.
Yeah, I got to check on that. But yeah, if you can, why wouldn't you?
There's a plot of land in Scotland that says I can do this.
It works for what's his face, the guy from Paul McCartney. The first 200 people purchasing the title pack using my link will effectively be next to my plot within a few minutes of walking distance. We can build our own little Majority Report kingdom. Established Titles now running a big sale. If you use the code majority, get an additional 10% off. Go to establishedtitles.com/majority. Use the code majority to get your gifts now and help support the show. That's establishedtitles.com/majority. Coupon code majority saves you 10%. Okay, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to be talking to Tim Drea, president of the Illinois AFL-CIO. Oh, before we go, I just want to say this. Yesterday, we ran an ad for a product that ostensibly does composting in your kitchen. I haven't gotten the product yet, and I'm waiting on it to try it out. We got some feedback from people who were very skeptical of this, and I'm looking into it. So we pulled the links. I don't want to, look, you can look it up yourself if you heard the ad yesterday. I'm going to check it out. We may or may not run it, but we don't run ads for products that we either, well, for the most part, I use all of these products. But when we get wind of something that we're not sure on its quality, or that it lives up to the promise, we're not going to run ads on it. So I appreciate the feedback. We're going to hold off on those till we check it out a little bit more. Quick break. We'll be right back with Tim Drea, president of the Illinois AFL-CIO, to talk about the Worker Rights Amendment in Illinois. We are back. Sam Seder on the Majority Report. It is a pleasure to welcome to the program Tim Drea. He is the president of the Illinois AFL-CIO, and he's here to talk about the Workers' Right Amendment. This is on the ballot, Tim, isn't it? In 6 days?
6 days. That's correct. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So what is the Workers' Rights Amendment?
Well, the Workers' Rights Amendment will amend the Bill of Rights of the Illinois Constitution to give workers the fundamental right to collectively bargain, the fundamental right to a safe workplace, no diminishment of safety, worker rights in current statute, and prohibit, preserve the right to collective bargaining in Illinois.
So this is basically a way to inhibit what we've seen really over the past 10, 15 years. I mean, it's existed down south quite a bit, but Wisconsin, I guess it was 10, 12 years ago, Scott Walker, largely funded by the Koch brothers and the Americans for Prosperity, started this almost like experiment where they're going to see how we can destroy things like the safety net in Wisconsin, the healthcare in Wisconsin, and the right for workers to organize. And so this sort of heads it off, right? Will you talk about that dynamic?
Yeah, exactly. Well, in 2014, the voters of Illinois elected Bruce Rauner, who wanted to be another Scott Walker. And he came in and he held the state budget hostage for 2.5 years until he could try to get a worker-friendly majority legislature to bust unions, especially public employee unions. And the leadership of each house of the General Assembly said, no, we're not going to do that. And they finally broke Bruce Rauner on what he called his turnaround agenda. And his turnaround agenda was, to inhibit, place restrictions on public employee collective bargaining, lower prevailing wage, decrease the minimum wage, and a whole slew of just different worker safety laws that have been passed over the last 120 years. Illinois has some very, very strong safety laws on the books, and mainly because we've had horrific accidents in the coal mines and other places throughout our history. So we have some really, really good statutes, and he wanted to roll those back. And now is not a time to be rolling back. And then we hit the pandemic, and people who work for a living went to work and didn't have the proper PPE and things like that, but they still showed up. And we had literally people dying on the job through COVID. And it's like, we can't do this anymore. We need constitutional guarantees that this can't happen.
All right. And to be clear, this is going to put it in the Constitution. It's going to make it extremely, it's not going to make it impossible for it to be reversed, but it's going to make it extremely difficult, right? For, a fluky right winger who gets in there and they may leverage these things and they can't turn this stuff around. I mean, I think people I don't know, Illinois is one of the epicenters of unionization in this country, right? I mean, the Haymarket riots that took place there, 150 years, somewhere around there. Mm-hmm. So give me your sense of the thing I like about this too, is it in the same way that Wisconsin was being set up to be sort of like a model of how you destroy the social fabric that they were hoping to export to other states. And to some extent, they've done this with some measures. this could function as sort of the antidote to that.
And you know, Sam, what I really like about this is we're going to the voters. We're not going to legislators. We're going directly to the voters and saying, do you want, you know, workplace safety in the Constitution? Do you want the right to collectively bargain, to come together with your coworkers and have a voice for change? So we're going to the voters and asking them rather than legislators who may or not be controlled by billionaire interest. So that's what the Constitution is a social contract with the voters and the politicians. And we're going to the voters and saying, is this what you want your state to be? And right. It's the enthusiasm and everything we've gotten is just unprecedented, and it's exciting. It's exciting to be a part of this.
I want to get into some of the specifics of it, just, you know, cover some of the specific points of this, but I also just want to you know, stay with this idea for just one more moment, which it's going to be fascinating to see. I mean, we don't have nearly the union density that we've had historically. I mean, we've lost that over the course of the past 30 or 40 years. But it's going to be fascinating to see what this does across the entire ticket, across the entire, you know, all the elections that are happening. Because if this brings out union folks en masse and their spouses, their kids, their friends, and this becomes also a model for other states when we head into a presidential election in terms of like turnout.
Yes, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. You said it very, very succinctly. Again, there's a lot of enthusiasm, and from all parts of the state, from all sectors of the movement. And, you know, our message is we're about 18% of the workforce in Illinois. So, you know, another thing, we are, you know, working hard on this campaign, not only 18% of the workforce, but 100% of the workforce is, you know, somebody that leaves home in the morning or before their shift starts and, you know, kisses a loved one goodbye and say, I'm going to work. This amendment protects that person. And so it is, we're just telling everybody, you know, your mother, your brother, your cousin, your neighbor, everybody, get out and vote for yourselves.
And we should say that the states that, I mean, industries that have some unionization, regardless whether it's across the industry, on balance, everyone makes more money. States that don't have right to work, so-called right to work laws, everybody on balance makes more money, up to like 15%, if I'm not mistaken. Yes. All right, so just what are some of the key, like, this makes it protects the right to unionize. What does it do in terms of like agency fees? Because over the past like 5 or 6 years, we've seen the Supreme Court just eviscerate unions in any way they can. What does it do for things like agency fees and negotiations and what?
Well, that's a great question. One we fielded quite a bit. For public employees, you know, people that work for the state of Illinois, or the city of Chicago, or the city of Springfield, or wherever, you know, they will still be under the Janus decision. You know, that which overturned 40 years of precedent, a unanimous decision in 1983 that was overturned by the Trump Supreme Court. So they are basically right to work, but there are protections in the Illinois Labor Relations Act on what they can negotiate for working conditions and hours and benefits and things like that. So they'll preserve that right, even though they don't have to pay the agency fees under Janus. They'll still be protected on what they can negotiate for, which in Wisconsin, what they did is they just took away the ability basically to negotiate for so many things that, you know, it was basically, it's very, very hard to improve the lives of working families in Wisconsin because of that. So that's the agency fees is we preserve the rights for public employees to negotiate. In the private sector, we have just the fundamental right for somebody to engage in collective bargaining, but we also have, things like the minimum wage and workers' comp, unemployment. We won't have any, workplace safety laws. I was a coal miner, so there was a lot of workplace safety laws involved in the mines. Those cannot be diminished. And it's just so important that, workplace safety is just, if somebody, as I mentioned earlier, has somebody's leaving for work and they kiss their loved one goodbye, we certainly want that worker to come back and say, I'm home, and kiss them again. Going to work is one thing. We love to create jobs, but we want people to come home even more.
Yep. All right. So Tim, where can people get more information on this if they want to help? We still got like 6 days going out there telling their neighbors about it. If they want to get more information on it, where can people go?
We go to Illinois AFL-CIO.org, ILAFL-CIO.org, and that will direct you to the Workers' Rights Amendment webpage, and there's plenty of information there.
All right. We will put a link to that at majority.fm as well as the podcast and YouTube description. Tim Drea, president of the Illinois AFL-CIO. Good luck. I think this is a really important amendment, not just for Illinois, but I think this is something that can be one of those pieces of legislation or referendums that can really both protect workers' rights and build upon workers' rights in around the country. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Sam. Best wishes.
All right. Bye-bye. All right, folks, going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to be talking to Lee Harris, reporter at the American Prospect, about the unionization efforts and promises, maybe a little bit unkept so far, in these industrial policy bills that have passed. I'll explain what that means when we come back. We are back. Sam Seder on the Majority Report. It's a pleasure to welcome to the program Lee Harris. She's a reporter at the American Prospect. You can find her work and all the other great work at the Prospect, prospect.org. Lee, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me on, Sam.
So industrial policy without industrial unions. When we're talking about industrial policy, the bill was called the Inflation Reduction Act. It really is questionable as to whether it really addresses inflation, but that seemed to be on everybody's lips at the time, and Joe Manchin really likes that. But it turns out that bill in particular, although there's some, I think, arguably, and the CHIPS bill are more akin to industrial policy. Would just explain that concept for folks.
Yeah, I mean, just quickly to say, I think the Inflation Reduction Act branding of the bill was kind of brilliant. It met the moment, and yeah, it probably doesn't reduce inflation a whole lot short term, but long term, capital investment and onshoring jobs seems like exactly the recipe to avoid bad inflation long term. Yeah, what's industrial policy? It's something we have been doing not explicitly for decades. I mean, we never stopped doing industrial policy. It means the government taking a hand in private sector production. So obviously, that's happened for years, whether it's the internet or any number of tech innovations that came out of military research, or the number of subsidies we hand out to big national champion corporations. But the idea of calling it industrial policy now means we're abandoning the neoliberal conceit that, the free market operates by itself and government is hands off. And we're saying, no, we're actually stepping in to compete with China, create jobs for American workers, which on the whole seems like, a mixed bag development geopolitically, but a really good development for American workers if it can deliver. Now, and I want to give it back to you, but the story that I'm coming on to talk about is called Industrial Policy Without Industrial Unions, because I've been looking at whether these big new subsidies for green manufacturing are actually going to deliver on Biden's promise of creating good union jobs, or even good jobs for that matter.
And that, how explicit, and I guess, and I want to agree with you both that it was the calling it the Inflation Reduction Act was, from a marketing standpoint, I think a great idea. And when we look at what we're experiencing now, it is not like classic monetary inflation as much as it is a function of supply lines and logistics, and arguably market concentration that is allowing some price gouging. And so to the extent that these bills, address that, which I think is probably sort of like a little bit of a bank shot, but in some instances, particularly with a semiconductor, pretty, I guess, straightforward. Where was there ever like an explicit, the Green New Deal, of course, was very much explicit about creating unionized jobs in new sectors. How explicit was that in the context of the CHIPS bill and the IRA?
Yeah, I think that's exactly what interests me about this question, is that we didn't do the Green New Deal. And that, in my view, that moment has kind of passed. We did something else, which was an enormous investment, and there's big potential upside to it. But the big, one of the main selling points of the Green New Deal was creating really high quality jobs for workers. And we should do that, I think, because it's a good thing, but also because it's a great political strategy, especially in hollowed out areas where, what are called energy communities in the Inflation Reduction Act, meaning that's the dumb euphemism for areas like West Virginia that are going to see decreasing investment in the coal sector. Swap that out with clean energy investments. So there is a new battery plant that's opening up in West Virginia that's going to be staffed by mine workers. Anyway, that's a long way of saying that it's an open question whether the IRA will actually deliver on that Green New Deal vision of creating good jobs. So maybe if I could talk about the auto sector in particular for a second, that'd be helpful.
Yes. And my understanding is that the vast majority of those auto sector jobs, like when we're talking about electric vehicles, is happening in southern states, in red states, where there is less likely to be robust unions and, in fact, less rights to unionize in those states. I mean, we just spoke to Tim Drea, AFL-CIO president in Illinois. They're passing essentially like a, I don't know, it's a worker rights amendment, but it is almost like an anti so-called right to work amendment, which would allow for more unionization. A lot of these electric vehicle plants are opening up in states where unionizing is hard to do.
Yeah. So my story actually specifically looks at a plant in Illinois for this reason. It looks at the new Rivian truck facility in electric trucks in Normal, Illinois. There is and workers want to unionize Rivian. There's an organizing drive. It's not clear that it's especially promising. And part of the reason that Democrats in the couple of blue states that have gotten big new investments, and there are several, I mean, there's production in Ohio and Illinois and a number of parts of the Midwest. Part of the reason that Democrat politicians, even like Pritzker, who's been fairly pro-union, have been unwilling to come out and go to bat for these union drives is this dynamic where they're scared that companies will leave for the non-union South. So it's this gotcha where if you raise worker standards too much in the North, companies are out of there, which is why these kinds of negotiations should be done at a federal level. For workers, if states are competing for the cheapest workforce, it's a race to the bottom. Just to talk quickly about, before you come back, just want to say there's an interesting dynamic where I think it's now pretty well known that Tesla, which was of course not Elon Musk's baby created, out of the sea foam, but was created by the Obama administration's big investment in green energy in 2008. That's now the biggest non-union U.S. automaker, and I think people know that. Obviously, there are a number of major non-union automakers that are going to be receiving subsidies from the Inflation Reduction Act. What's crazy to me is that even at the big three union automakers, so that's Ford, Stellantis, Chrysler, and GM, these new investments that they're going to be getting might not create good jobs or even union jobs. So the backstory there is that after the Great Recession, United Auto Workers took huge concessions, and they agreed that newly hired workers could be paid half the union salary, reducing their wages from $28 an hour to just $14 an hour. They created this second tier of workers that are paid less. And okay, you could argue that makes some sense at the time when unions were bargaining from a position of weakness. It was controversial at the time. What's really outrageous is that now, as taxpayer dollars are pouring into these factories in order to bring jobs back on shore, and auto workers should be bargaining from a position of strength, more lower tier jobs are being created rather than fixing that problem of the past decade and bringing everyone up to the same tier. And just as a final point, these three union automakers, where every new shop is supposed to be union, they've actually found a loophole to be able to add non-union shops, which is that with these new battery producers that they're creating, these new battery plants, they're structuring them as joint venture companies. So companies shared with some battery producer like Korean LG. And then they say, because it's a joint venture with a non-union company, they don't have to be union. So there's a big battle ahead that actually is just kicking off this week over whether those new battery plants are going to be unionized at all.
Where does that battle take place? I mean, if they're getting subsidies from the U.S. government, I guess presumably from Treasury or from how does that? Yeah. Who polices that? I mean, because obviously the standard in terms of like if there was an opportunity, and I wonder if there. Okay, let me just slow down. Legislatively, there could have been tighter sort of like requirements associated with this funding. Can there be retroactively unilateral? I guess, creation of these standards from the president, from the executive office, A, and then B, who does the policing of this?
Great. So two levels to the answer. There's like hard power, soft power. Hard power would be writing into every contract. And yeah, you're right, it's Treasury. It's also the Department of Energy is giving manufacturing credits and just manufacturing loans to these big producers the way they did with Tesla. One thing would be for the Department of Energy to say any company that takes this loan has to allow card check unionization or like unionization strategies that give workers a fair shot at unionizing in a really low union density sector. American labor law is pretty anti-union though, and so in the past sometimes those efforts at the federal level have been challenged in the courts. But what the Biden administration could certainly do is something that actually United Auto Workers are calling on them to do just this week, which is negotiate directly with companies for labor standards. I'll give you an example. So the battery maker Ultium Cells, which got a $2.5 billion loan from the Department of Energy, is not recognizing the majority of workers who have signed cards there authorizing United Auto Workers to represent them. UAW originally tried to get card check unionization before they even started, but the company ignored them. And UAW just announced that they're going to file for a union election through the NLRB process, which could be slower and costlier. And so the Biden administration could come out there and say, we're handing you this multi-billion-dollar loan of taxpayer money, and could privately put pressure on the company. And by the way, the company that's probably expecting more subsidies down the line. And then one other example, if I could give it to you, is Hyundai, which is currently caught in a child labor scandal. So Hyundai has been caught not once but several times using child laborers as young as 12 years old, and simultaneously, Hyundai is lobbying the Biden administration to get earlier access to these subsidies. They don't have an EV plant in the U.S. up and running yet, and the requirement. The new EV subsidies require cars to be they're by American standards. They need to be made domestically. So Hyundai's like, we don't have our EV plant up and running here yet, but we're a major trade partner. Let us get access to those subsidies. So on the one hand, they're asking for something from the Biden administration, earlier access to subsidies. On the other hand, they're embarrassed and they've just been caught in an outrageous child labor scandal. So UAW has said to the Biden administration, use this opportunity to say, Hyundai, raise your standards for workers, and for instance, give workers an opportunity for card check unionization or any number of other measures that could get them closer to a union. The Biden administration has been silent on it. So I think it's a pretty disappointing sign in this broader question that I think is going to unfold over the next couple of years of whether green manufacturing, as it's onshored, is actually going to create good jobs for Americans.
So when my car company goes to the energy department, I don't automatically qualify for a loan. I go through a loan application process, and I might negotiate in terms of like what the rates are or what the payment schedule is. None of this stuff is not all pre-baked in. And so the idea that the energy department could go like, oh, you know what, we got 3 tiers of terms on this. We got the, sort of like the gold standard if you want it, but to get the gold standard, you need to allow X, Y, and Z to happen in terms of unionization. And then, they have the authority to finesse that type of thing.
Totally. And by the way, Republicans in right to work states are incredibly good at doing the opposite, at coordinating to prevent union drives. So whenever there's a whiff of unionizing, I have an example of this in my story, the state will get together and sometimes illegally, Republican politicians have said we're withholding subsidies over this question. So Democrats should match them at their own game and use some soft power to get union concessions out of these big companies that are getting billions in taxpayer dollars.
What is it that like, what's the agenda? Is this a function of the administration just being like, oh, we just can't get our shit together type of situation? Or is it more like, for us, what we want to do is get the jobs here because that's going to look better in terms of the numbers in the short term, and the value of unionization is just not as important? I mean, I suspect it's a little bit of both, but the latter must implicate it a lot.
It's a really good point. So one thing is to say, I do think there's a significant set within the Biden administration that really wants these to be good union jobs. And so you'll see in some of the Department of Energy contracts I mentioned, you'll see them trying to negotiate in high labor standards as part of the procurement process. So that means the companies they select for loans, one of the criteria that they might be using is their openness to labor drives, which is really promising. The other thing is, exactly like you said, a lot of these industries have been so offshored that the kind of gamble is to first onshore them and then unionize them. To say, this is the difference between the Inflation Reduction Act and the Green New Deal. The Inflation Reduction Act is an industrial policy program. It goes through big companies. It says we're a partnership between the public and private sector. We're working through private companies, not through a grassroots labor movement. And so the gamble, which really is a gamble, is to first onshore the jobs and have them be in America at all, and then try and see if you can raise labor standards.
I can understand, I guess, the logic of that on some level, but I also wonder if there isn't like a sweet spot where it's sort of like, we know how much this $2.5 billion subsidy is worth to you, and if you have to give some back in terms of unionization or power to the workers, we know what figure where that lands. But let me ask you this, and I'm not sure that you would have insight into this, but over the course of your reporting, you're giving out the subsidies out of the Energy Department, maybe the Treasury. Those people, I just assume like the staffing of those, of that agency in particular, but others, their primary focus may be around these questions of energy and of maybe of transportation or of industrial policy, as opposed to say like the Labor Department, which is more oriented towards like protecting workers' rights. Like where these grants emanate from, how much of like what agency that ends up issuing these grants will influence or implicate the strings that are attached to them? In other words, like, you know, does labor send over some people over to Energy Department and go like, hey guys, like this is, I mean, how does that work?
So I don't know that the right way to think about it is as like competition between departments. There may be some of that. My sense just from interviewing people and reporting is that at least a significant set within the Biden administration is, and that doesn't count whatever civil servants, but are pretty sold that in order to make this work politically, they have to be decent jobs. Like if you're someone who's a big green energy booster, you know, unlike the Obama era investments, I think there's much more consensus now that we can't make these shit jobs. But to your point, there is tons of lobbying of the Department of Labor, for instance, to reduce standards for these new emerging green industries. So, for example, in the solar industry, there's a long-standing complaint by labor unions that big solar companies have been lobbying to get this new designation called solar installer, that the unions say, I think correctly, is just an excuse to not to train this new labor force very well and to give them a really limited set of skills that they can pay them not very much. So, for example, just a union laborer, it is a laborer. You don't call him a bridge installer or a road installer. A union laborer has a whole range of skills that make him marketable in a number of different industries. And there are big fights right now anyway between these new green industries and between the Labor Department over the pay level and the number of skills that the new green workforce is going to be trained up with.
I feel like that's modeled in some ways off of like cable and telecommunications, where they really, Verizon in particular, I think with wireless, tried to basically use that as a way of getting rid of a lot of their unionized labor force by changing those designations. Well, it's a fascinating piece. And so let me ask you this. What can like we do like from the union perspective, right? Like there's an attempt by organized labor, I would imagine, and some elements within the administration that are like, you know, we should be putting these sort of like riders on these deals more or less. What can we do outside of that world? You know, how does us knowing about it, where do we exert some influence as citizens? I mean, this is a conversation that David Dayan and I have had many, many times over the years, but where, from your perspective, like what do they say? Like, I mean, obviously like talking to you, they perceive this as like, you know, it's going to activate, you know, forces within society that may influence the administration, but how does that work?
I mean, okay, if I could just contest the question a little bit.
Sure.
You know, we have lots of participatory kind of civic democracy, but even I think whatever ordinary people can probably like give to union drives or something. I don't know, but there's a really interesting fight ahead, but it's basically a fight between a really depleted union sector and a heavily subsidized employer class to see what can be extracted from them. And I'm sure on the margins, like concerned citizens can do stuff, but part of the reason we're in this position is that associational democracy, you know, democratic organizations like unions have been completely hollowed out in favor of, I don't know, like NGOs and random citizens who want to get involved in stuff. So I would just say it's a really interesting and important fight. I don't know, maybe, I don't know, call your congressman or something, but mostly this is going to be a fight by a fairly radical angry and passionate segment of the labor movement. There's a part of UAW which has had a number of corruption scandals and has had a really tough past couple of years. But there's a reform movement called UAWD, the D stands for democracy, that's trying to kind of rally United Auto Workers to take on more non-unionized shops and to come out and be much more ambitious in the number of sectors that they're trying to organize, going beyond just, college, graduate student workers and kind of professional class workers, and really trying to organize big new industries. I think that's ambitious and exciting, and it's also going to be an uphill battle. One other dynamic to watch is that, and it comes up in my story, a lot of big name companies like Rivian and Tesla rely heavily on subcontractors who drive down wages and often allow for all kinds of labor violations to go unchecked. So like in the instance of Rivian, they used a Chinese subcontractor that used two further subcontractors to fly in Mexican workers to build the Rivian facility in Illinois, and then subsequently denied them wages. There was a wage theft scandal that was thankfully rectified by the Illinois Attorney General. But that kind of story is really common. So I'm reporting now on the fact that in the solar industry, even though we've seen tons of investments in a scaling up of solar, wages are actually falling for workers, partly because you have these exploitative subcontractors and temp staffing agencies that skim off the top of the hourly wage that these workers make. Anyway, it's to come back to your question, what can ordinary kind of observers do? I think getting involved with the labor fight in whatever way they can, and paying attention to these big new industries that are being kind of stood up right now, whose worker standards will matter for the next several decades.
I'd add too that I think that it doesn't necessarily it's not necessarily intuitive, but just the idea of stories like this getting more exposure creates a pressure on the administration. They are political animals. If they perceive that more people are paying attention to these dynamics, they feel pressure regardless of what is in their hearts or what they desire, because they're definitely getting pressure from the other side. Lee Harris at the American Prospect will put a link to Industrial Policy Without Industrial Unions at majority.fm in our podcast and YouTube descriptions. Thanks so much for your time today. Really great piece.
Thank you, Seb.
All right, folks, going to take a quick break, head into the fun half of the program, wherein we will have fun. We have numerous clips. We are 6 days out from the election. If there's something that you can do to drive a little bit of the vote, not a bad time to do it. It's probably the best time to do it. We got to take a quick break. Senator Marcia Blackburn. Oh, glad to have you with us. It would be so awesome.
She waited on hold.
Yeah, on the IM, it would be so awesome if there was a way to interact or ask a question to the guest. Yes, it is your interview, but maybe beforehand, member can submit some questions, and you can pick a couple to ask in the interview. If we could ever find out, if we could ever figure out like an efficient mechanism to do that, that would be good. I don't know what that would be. Maybe it's a Discord thing.
Yeah, or like. Yeah, because I know we get IMs throughout, so it might just be hard to filter through.
The IMs will be difficult.
Discord, you could do just a separate channel saying today's guest.
Set up today's guest and questions, and maybe pull a couple. That's a good idea. Look at that. Look at how innovative we are.
Live on air.
Wow, that's great stuff.
Maybe we should let libertarians call in and talk to the guests too. No, I'm joking.
Really cool. It says, call, email, tweet your Congress members post-election to support the PRO Act. That's what you can do, indeed. All right, we're going to take a quick break. Just a reminder, This show relies on the support of people like you to survive and thrive. You can become a member at jointhemajorityreport.com. When you do, you get the free half, free of commercials. You get the fun half. And we got to figure out, maybe with the Discord thing, we can do. I mean, I think that would be a good member perk. So maybe I talk to Kyle and figure out maybe there's a way to do that in some way where, members can ask, put in questions, and we can try and get to a couple of those during the course of the interview. That's a good idea. Senator Marsha Blackburn. See, I'm not all bad. There she goes. She did a great job. She did a great job of that today. JoinTheMajorityReport.com. Become a member today. We can always use your help. And as always, if you are in a situation where you can't afford it, but you want access to the fun half, send us an email at majorityreporters@gmail.com. Put in the subject line member show and give us a little time. We will get to you, though. And if for some reason you have fallen through the cracks, you sent an email, you never heard anything back, send it one more time for us. And bear with us. Appreciate it. Probably happen after the election, but nevertheless, send that in. Also, justcoffee.coop. Fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. Use the coupon code majority. Get 10% off. I mentioned Scott Walker in that first interview with Illinois president of the AFL-CIO. In 2010, there was a bunch of protests in Madison, Wisconsin, against what Scott Walker was doing. They lasted for like months. Really impressive. And Just Coffee, it's a Madison-based co-op. They were out there handing out free coffee to all the protesters. Just a great company. And they've been supporting this program for a long time. So justcoffee.coop. Pick up the Majority Report blend. ESVN happening tomorrow.
OT on the ESPN YouTube channel.
Yes.
YouTube.com/ESPN show for the live stream. We got a lot to get to besides our picks and a lot of NBA, NFL news coming down the pike these last few days. So
it's a lot of stuff happening, like Kyrie, Nash,
the Nets, the NFL trade deadline. Dan Snyder might be selling the Washington Commanders. So
you can't be full on, you can't be full on racist. Like, what's the point of having your own football team?
So,
of course.
YouTube.com/ESPN show for the stream tomorrow.
And last night, the flagship of the Matt Leckian media universe. Did I just mix metaphors?
Flagship of the universe? No, that could work. Sort of like this. It's like a sort of starship.
Yeah, right.
The starship, flag starship of the universe. What's happening in that universe?
We celebrated Lula's victory last night with Deep State Cuba of This Is Revolution. Check that out, folks.
All right, folks, 646-257-3920 is the number. We will see you in the fun half. And you can IM the show, of course, by picking up our app at majorityapp.com, both the iOS and the Android version. Free. See you then.
You are in for it.
All right, folks, 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
Are you ready?
Who sent us this?
Alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just as delicious as you could imagine.
The alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just wanna degrade the white man.
Alpha males are back.
I take all of it.